This is Learning to Dad.
I'm the cool dad. That's my thing.
With Tyler Ross.
What I do have are a very particular set of skills.
I'm gonna have fun, and you're gonna have fun.
Oh, yeah? Have you lived in Wisconsin your whole life, like born and raised and all?
Yeah, born and raised in Wisconsin.
All right. Well, welcome to the welcome to the podcast, Mike Jesowshek. How are you today, man?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. So I'm about an hour outside of DC. You come this direction much?
You know, I'm a big kind of into politics and history and those types of things. So I wasn't in DC, but my wife and I, as we were expecting kind of our second child, we were like, let's get away for a weekend. And my mom said, we'll take them. So we picked somewhere to go, and it was DC, and I loved it. So we were out there about a year ago.
Oh, cool. What'd you end up doing out here?
You know, we did the different memorials. We did, went to the Arlington, caught some good food. There's lots of good restaurants around that area. Yeah. Where else did we go? That was about it. You know, it was a short weekend, so we get out on Thursday and left a Sunday. But, you know, there's definitely a lot of things we missed. But we spent a day in Georgetown. That was cool, too. So a lot of things we missed, but it was fun. And at least have a list of, okay, here's what we want to do when we come back.
Yeah, super. And, you know, if you're into politics and the rest, like out here, everybody feels kind of tight around the axle all the time. Like it's pencil skirts and power suits and gray and black and policy wonks everywhere. And it's like I yearn to be further away so that I don't have to have those conversations all the time. But they can be so stimulating with people that don't mind having an open mind.
Yeah.
And just having a good debate as opposed to hating you for being on one side or the other. Argument.
Yeah.
But,
it's a tough thing, but yeah.
Yeah, we got to be able to communicate on stuff that we disagree about for sure. So you're an expert in tax savings, you know, for small business owners particularly. You're a speaker, author. You tell me you host a podcast as well. Breaking down the complex world of taxes into easy-to-use strategies. You're looking to just legally advance somebody's goal of paying as little taxes as possible. You've been involved in educating thousands of people nationwide, which is amazing. You must have either a longer day than us or have been able to scale this in some way. And these are all things that I think every listener are going to be interested in because you start talking about taxes, I just pass it over to my accountant. I'm like, don't talk to me about any of this. Like, I just want to go make as much as I can and not think about the rest.
Yeah, you know, It's funny because, you know, a little background about my career. I've always been an entrepreneur and never worked for anyone else. So I started at the age of 14 with my first business at that point. And I really was in the online marketing industry. And so I was an online marketer, loved doing what I was doing, and, you know, need to go to school. And I always thought, you know, okay, if I go to school and let's say this online marketing thing doesn't work out, what are some good routes that at least I know I have good opportunities, a high-paying job. So I went to school to be an accountant and went and got my CPA after school. And I was in a firm that there were 7 of us within that firm, all really good at different parts of online marketing, but very different parts of the industry. And so at that point in time, the partner decided, hey, it's better us that we just kind of go off on our own and focus on our specialty instead of trying to pull a company in a bunch of different directions. And that's when I went out and started an accounting firm because I was handling the whole finance side of this company that we were at. And the industry that I was in, this was back in 2013, was very younger generation. Everyone worked at home. And so I've always worked from home, never worked in an office. And so I went out to start an accounting firm. I didn't know anything about tax. I was more just on the finance side, the accounting, bookkeeping piece. And so started an accounting firm focusing on that specific industry. And it was a 100% cloud-based accounting firm, which nowadays is fairly common. You hear about it, especially after COVID, you hear accounting firms working virtually. But back in 2013, that wasn't as common. common. It wasn't typical to find an accountant that would serve clients across the country and work virtually and do Zoom meetings and all those different things. So that kind of broke down a challenge. But I got into taxes by the way of I was always partnering with tax accountants and ran into tax issues myself from a tax liability standpoint, and was always struggled to ask working with accountants. I'd say, how do I do this strategy, or how do I do this? And constantly got answers of saying, well, it depends. And I need to know this, this, and this in order to be able to tell you how to utilize this strategy. And I got really frustrated with that because, as a business owner, when you hear it depends, or I'm going to need all this information, or there's all these different things, as a business owner, I say, well, it's probably not worth it. It's not worth my time to go through that effort. So I'm going to forget about it and not utilize that strategy. And so it kind of broke out a passion for me to say, how can I know taxes depends, and I know when we talk about tax strategies, it does depend, but the core strategies that we talk about that every small business owner can implement, about 90% of the strategy is the same for everybody. And I like to give the example of hiring your kids inside of your business. That strategy of hiring your kids as a business owner is the same for 90% of that strategy. The concept, what you need to do correctly, how you do it, what it looks like, the documentation you have to support it and back it up, that's the same for everybody. Now, there's that little bit of 10% of that strategy where it actually does depend. So, if you have a 17 and a 10-year-old and I have an 8 and a 9-year-old, that's the way that we utilize the strategy is going to look a little bit different. Or if I'm a landscaping company and you're an attorney, the way that we structure what our kids are going to be doing and how that looks is going to be a little bit different. But the core concept of that strategy is the same. And so that has really been my passion to say is how can I get strategies and talk to business owners about that 90% so that business owners understand these strategies and then just have to go that little 10% and tweak it to make it make sense to them. Instead of saying, how do I hire my kids in my business? And it's automatically goes, it depends. No, I say, how do you hire your kids in your business? Here's how you do it. Here's what you need to do. Here's things you need to be aware of. And now it does depend on that little bit that's unique to your situation. What are your kids going to be doing? You determine that. What are you going to pay them? You can determine that. And so that's kind of my passion in the last few years has really been to be able to educate business owners on what's available to them so that they are not instantly stuck with an it depends and walking the other way, away from strategies that are relatively available to them.
So are you typically educating people so they can go back and talk to their accountant, so you're sort of a consultant in that respect, or are you actually taking over and doing taxes for people?
Yeah, so I started that accounting firm, digital cloud-based accounting firm in 2013. As soon as I started getting to tax, we started adding those tax services as well. And so was doing full-service accounting, bookkeeping, taxes, payroll for small business owners. And then I kind of got backed into a podcast, which is more of this passion of educating business owners of what's available. I wasn't a podcast guy. I didn't listen to podcasts. I didn't do anything with podcasts, but I had an employee that did. And he said, hey, you have some YouTube videos on there. Why don't you maybe think about starting a podcast? I'm like, well, I don't really know anything about podcasts. But I said, okay, I'm willing to try. I'll throw anything at the wall, and if it sticks, we go with it. And so we took some YouTube videos we had, and we put them up on a podcast. And about 6 months later, and there's only 4 videos, about 6 months later, we had people reaching out that said, hey, I really enjoy what you're talking about on your podcast. I'd love to learn more about working with you. And I was like, oh, what podcast are you talking about? And it finally came back to recognition. It was like, oh, somebody found us. And so that was kind of my cue to say, hey, let's start doing this more often. Let's make it more consistent. Let's do it more often. And so that has all been free type of content, offering these. I go very deep. I take a complex strategy and try to make it as simple and easy to understand and get people 90% of the way there. And so really fell in love with that passion and eventually sold the majority of stake in my accounting firm back in 2021 so that I could move my focus on this idea of educating it at the mass level. And so now what my day-to-day job is running our podcast, which again is all free content. We do videos, blog posts, everything else about these different tax strategies that are available to small business owners. And then I recently built out a software program that helps do the training on these strategies. So, to help people, we constantly had people coming to us and say, okay, I'm 90% of the way there, but now I do need help with that last 10%. And so we create a solution for that where a lot of people have great accountants. They're working with great accountants that they just don't do tax planning with them. And so there's nothing wrong with that accountant. There's tax strategists and then there's tax preparers. And so my theory has always been like work with us either on our podcast and take it to your accountant, or in our software and take it to your accountant. Tax preparer, if you've been using them, your family's been using them forever, can be a great relationship that I would never want to pull somebody from. But if we can somehow get that planning piece into your table, because not every tax preparer is a tax planner. So if we can get that planning piece to your table, it's a great combination and a great marriage between, a tax strategist and a preparer. So all that to say is I no longer do tax prep and filings. I no longer do client accounting or bookkeeping. It's strictly, my time and attention is strictly on this education piece.
So when you're talking about educating small business owners, there are lots of different ways to define what that is. Do you have a kind of archetypal small business that gets the most value from you, whether it be a minimum in revenue annually, a minimum number of employees, or maybe even just the profile of what their family looks like? Like who stands to get the most out of the information you share?
Yeah, so I think at one level, if you look at our podcast, the ideal listener of our podcast is going to be a business with a revenue between just getting started, so 0, and I would say about a 5 million, with a general income of anywhere between 0 or $10,000, $20,000 up to say about $750,000 is and a business owner, obviously. That's kind of our core audience. Anything above that, it's not that we can't help them. It's just from a podcast standpoint, the tax strategies that we tell someone that's making $100,000 a year are the same strategies that we're going to tell someone making $1 million a year. So that person making $1 million a year is going to implement the same strategies that the $100,000 a year person's doing. The person making $1 million a year just is going to have additional strategies maybe on top of that maybe aren't available to someone at $100,000 as an example. And so once people start to hit into that $1 million, $2 million, $3 million in household income, I tend to see that they start to work with some sort of like a family office type situation where they have kind of a tax strategist on their team. And so that's what we typically say, our core audience is going to be that 0 to $750,000. But that's also another thing that I like to talk to business owners, and I hear this so often. They're like, I'm too small to save taxes. Like, I'm making $50,000 a year, Mike. There's no taxes to really be saved. Like, I'm paying taxes, but strategies aren't for people like me. It's for the millionaires. And that's the kind of myth that I like to debunk, to say, hey, you know what? The person making $1 million is going to implement. You're going to implement every strategy that I want to implement with you at $50,000. The millionaire is doing those same exact strategies. They might just have some more advanced type strategies, but the core, the root strategies we talk about are relevant to business owners of any shape and size.
So listening to you talk, it makes so much sense to me that you would move away from the actual bookkeeping, the actual accounting and taxes, because I find most of the accountants I know, me and my dad joke, they put the douche in fiduciary. Like, they're not able to think of anything other than finding that one penny that's gone. And you seem to think so abstractly and big picture, and to be able to kind of work in the gray of finding these legal avenues to maximize your tax strategies. But I'd like to talk to you about the podcast itself that you've created and built. Has that on its own become a revenue source for you, or is it more of like a lead capture? So I think a great way of getting business is to just give away value, and then that brings people to want to pay you for your services. What role does the podcast play?
Yeah, so when we first started our podcast, it was simply, like you mentioned it, the goal is to be a lead to our firm. And that was the motivation to start that podcast. And as I got into it deeper, I just really was hearing stories and really loved this ability to bring strategies to the forefront. You know, so many people are saying like, I knew about this hiring your kid strategy, but I asked my accountant and it just never got anywhere. So I never did it. I never went anything with it. And so really kind of fell in love with that passion. But at the same time, you know, you can be a podcaster doing great content and people love you, but if you're not making any money, how do you keep doing it? And so it was a lead source for my firm. And then as we got out of, you know, as I sold the majority stake in my firm, still have a minority interest, just more of a leadership role to that firm currently. It still continues to be a lead source for that firm. But more importantly, I found a situation where a lot of people were saying, you know, in between there, I had a training program that says, hey, you don't need to, you know, we don't need to do everything for you. Here's a training program that we teach you how to do these strategies and everything you need to know about them. And we're kind of that resource to them. But I had a lot of business owners come to us that said, hey, Mike, you know, I love what you're doing. I just don't know what's most important to me. Like what do I specifically like? I hear you talk about all these different strategies, but I don't even know where to start because there's so many strategies out there that I don't want to waste time on a strategy that just doesn't make sense for me. And so that's where this idea of the software came from is how can we, you know, build a solution that tells you, you know, based on your situation, your family, you know, what kids you have, whether you're married, single, business owner, not business owner, do you have any other income? You know, what are the strategies that are going to be relevant to you? And so that's where this kind of software piece is now a lead funnel for us. So we don't make any money on the podcast per se. You know, we don't do any sponsorships. You know, we don't have any paid ads or anything like that. Goal with the podcast is one, first and foremost, to educate, but then two, you know, we want to monetize it and be able to continue to do this kind of stuff and be able to help business owners. And so that way of monetizing that is either someone that's coming to our software and utilizing that kind of as us as their tax strategist, or someone that says, you know, I do need a full-time accountant that does bookkeeping, prep, and all those different things. Well, then we have a network of firms on the back end, including the firm that I used to own, that we can get them in front of, and we earn a commission on any leads that we send that way. So that's kind of our monetization path for the podcast. And initially it was just like, let's just try this podcast thing and see if it works. And that's what it led out to.
Yeah, it sounds like you definitely have the mindset of an entrepreneur. Like you look at the path of working for somebody in a marketing firm, trying to build that, and then starting your own company and then selling part of that company, but being involved. It's like being ground level and grinding out the work is something that you start and then something that you quickly move away from so that you can either scale it or build it or make it more valuable to somebody else. Can you speak to like another entrepreneur listening to this? Like, I'm sure you're not the one punching in code on software building. Can you talk about like organizing development of something that I assume you had no previous experience with?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I'm definitely not a coder, so and I couldn't be further from it. I know very little about how that works, and it's often funny times. So you know, I'll go to the coders and say like, "Hey, I'm looking to do this feature, do this change," and I'm thinking it's something that's going to take 5 minutes, and then like, oh man, that's going to be really expensive and really long. And then the other thing that I'm like, this is going to be really hard to implement. They're like, no, it's already done. Like I just changed it for you. And I'm like, how does that work? So that's how uneducated of a coder that I am. But when I first started my accounting firm back in 2013, being a cloud-based accounting firm wasn't very common then, and there was no like clear solution for like a project management type system on the market that was specific to accountants. And so my partner at that time in that firm, his wife was a developer, a coder. And so we said, there's nothing on the market that's a project management for cloud-based accounting firms. You know, why don't we create one? And so we went through this process of creating project management software specific to cloud-based accounting firms. The problem, and this was a great learning experience, but the problem with it is that I basically told the coder exactly, here is what I want this software to do. I don't know how to do it. I don't know what steps you take to get there, but here's what I want the software to do. And then she went and actually made it. The problem that we faced was it took us about 3.5 years to build the software because we wanted it to be perfect. We wanted every feature to be perfect. We wanted it to do exactly what we wanted and look great and do everything else great. And by the time that we finished this product 3.5 years later, there was 5 competitors on the market with funding and venture capitalists behind them that we really had no chance to do anything. And so that was really a key to me to say, you know, if we would have put this product out in 6 months at a very much lower, product, but something that worked. We could have put it out at 6 months and been at least as part of this game with these other 5 competitors. But waiting to come out after they were, it was just not possible for us. And so when we launched this new software, it was the same thing. I call it the MVP, or minimal viable product, just saying, I have this idea for a software, and how do we get something on the market? It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to look and do exactly how we want it, but how do we get something on the market as quick as possible that at least will service and bring value to small business owners? And so that's what our software did. We, instead of taking 3.5 years, this software, I basically kind of listed out, here's what I want this software to do. Can you do it? And how do you do it? And they were able to do it. And it took us roughly 6 to 8 months to build out this, what I call an MVP, a minimal viable product, which a great product, but we do want to enhance it. And we've launched it and have had really good success with it. And the fun thing about that is, and the thing that I didn't necessarily realize is, I thought that I knew exactly what I wanted this software to do, and I was the person that knew what I wanted this software to do. But what we find out, that when we do have these MVP products and we can easily add features, change features, redesign things, is that the users are telling us what they want. So what I necessarily thought people wanted might not be what people actually want, and we've been able to learn from that in this experience, where users are like, hey, I'm kind of, I'm confused in this area, or I could really love, think you could enhance this feature. And I'm like, great, that's what we're going to do. Even though that might have been like upgrade number 100 on my list, it's what the users want. So we've been upgrading it that way, which has been a really fun experience, and just constantly changing the software. The software's been live for, and we launched in like November of 2023. So we're going on, say, 8 months of having that software live. And we've had a lot of changes, updates, enhancements to that software that can really be implemented really quick. So had a really bad learning experience, but it's helped in this instance of the new software.
Yeah, and I want to dive into that through this question quickly. Replace the word failure with any word that you want to use: educational experience, failure, anything. To somebody who tried to develop software, kind of fell flat on its face, and then you put your chips back on the table to try it again. Like somebody that's in between that, somebody that had their first kind of flop, or what advice would you give to somebody that's thinking about putting their chips back on the table, like to get their mind right to go, let's try again?
Yeah, it's just this idea of, how do you do it that is going to, you're taking a risk. Anytime you start a new business, develop a new software, whatever it might be, you're taking a risk. But how do you take that risk but also minimize it as much as possible? And my businesses, and what I've always done is, I'm always bootstrapped. So I'm not going to venture capitalists. I'm not raising a bunch of money. It's, hey, I have what I have here, and it's, we're going to build this business from the ground up with as little money as possible. And how do we do it the most efficient way? And so I think for someone that's just getting started, it's that concept of saying, get something out to the market. It doesn't have to be perfect, but if you can see some blood there, you can see some future to that, then that means that we can keep chugging along that. So before I even created this software, I had this training program. And this training program has now basically transformed into our software. But this training program was something that I used somebody else's software. I used a software called Kajabi, and I built this training program out there. And it didn't really take off. It didn't explode in popularity, but there was definitely interest there. And there was definitely people coming that were utilizing it and loved it, but they just wanted more. They wanted, just didn't quite fill their needs for it. So that was my indication that said, hey, this training software, or this training program that was relatively easy, a small monthly fee to maintain and set up, was great to get that initial feedback. Are we hitting the market? Is this what people want? Is this what small business owners need? And then their feedback to us said, hey, I love it, but I want more. That was our indication to say, hey, this software is the next piece. So if that would have blew up, if that training program would have blew up and grown like crazy, and everyone loved it and had no complaints, there wouldn't be a software today. But what happened was that people said, I love it, but I want more. I want that next step. And that's where it was kind of that indication of saying, okay, I got the green light. Is it for sure going to work? Is this software going to absolutely work? No, but I do got some green light. I got some beta users in here. I have some people that have told me what they want, and it makes that dive into a bigger project, a bigger cost, a bigger time commitment, less risky, because at least I have something proven that there's that need there. Now it's just up to me to make sure I'm filling that need correctly and doing it the right way.
All right, I want to talk about risk. How old are your kids? How many do you have?
Yeah, so I have 2 kids. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and now we have one more on the way that was a little unexpected, but we're coming. So yeah, we'll have 3 kids in October now.
The infamous bonus, baby. Congratulations on all of that.
Yeah.
So to go to risk, how has having kids and another on the way impacted your appetite for risk?
You know, I feel like it's made it even. I've been able to take more risk, and it's this idea of calculated risks. So, you know, I think my oldest child is 3.5 years old. He was born in November of 2020, and I sold my business in a majority stake of my business in March of 2021. And so you'll see that there's like a 4 months there. That idea to sell a business was very risky because I had a successful accounting firm, but I saw the need of the way that the path that I was going down of being frustrated with my work, being stuck into client work, always working long hours and just really struggling to enjoy what I was doing was not a path that I wanted to continue to go down. And so I looked at that as there's 2 routes that I can go down. Keep doing this and have that struggle and fear unless I change something. And so that change was either going to be invest in something in this business that gets me outside of it, and gets me outside of the day-to-day, or sell it and try to start something new that gets me more into what I enjoy working. So I made that first opportunity then where it was like a calculated risk. You know, I'm already in a bad situation from a time and mental standpoint. I was in a bad situation, and so my risks were I can either stay in this bad situation or take a risk and hopefully get into a different situation. So, you know, it was like there was risk in not doing anything just as much as there was risk in trying something new. And so, again, but I think it comes down to calculated. Like, I didn't take our life savings and throw them into this new project that we're working on. I said, like, let's slow build this out, and I'm willing to invest money, but it's not going to be everything. And so, you know, it's that idea of that calculation.
So has your inspiration or motivation to work changed since having kids?
You know, that's a good question, and I think that at this time I would say yes. You know, like I'm building much more than, it's not just for me. It's not just for me and my wife now. You know, what we're doing in the legacy and what I want to do is doing it as a family now. I think that, you know, having kids so young, you just don't envision. It's hard for me to envision what are they going to look like in 10 years and 15 years, and how do they play into this role of being a business? And you know, so when I look at my business, I'm not envisioning my kids being inside of it, or how do I handle this business over to them. It's more just saying, like, how can I set myself up for the best opportunity, 1, to take care of our family, but 2, enjoy what I'm doing and be able to still spend time with my family while I'm doing that. And how can I best set that up? So I would say, yeah, you know, if we didn't have our first child, can I say for sure that I would have sold our accounting firm or sold my accounting firm? I don't know. I almost think no, but it's hard to tell because, you know, the opportunity to sell the firm did not arise until after my child was born. And, you know, I feel like that had a big role in that decision.
There's so much evolving we do professionally, you know, from our first job to our first career to the first business we own to the second, third, and so on, that we become different people, take different approaches with new ideas. And I think the same in parenting. Like, I was a different dad to my 6-month-old kid than I am to my 9-year-old kid. So now that they're that age. So how do you feel like, you know, this would be good for you, because what's the difference between like your role as a dad for the 3.5-year-old in the role that you're going to have soon with a newborn. Like, how have you felt yourself evolve as a father?
Yeah, it's funny because I've been challenged a lot in various different business ventures, and starting out on my own at 14, and then being in a partnership, and then being in businesses alone with no partnership. There's been a lot of challenges, which I was like, man, this being a business owner, this being an entrepreneur thing is really tough. And then I had kids, and I realized that these challenges of entrepreneurship, it's like, okay, I still have some control over that. Where kids, it's like you don't have control. But I think the thing that I've learned so much is that I thought when I first had kids, it's like, okay, everybody just has kids. And so you just learn as you go. Like, you learn as you're doing it, which I wish I would have stepped back before having our first child and said, like, how do I get more educated about this idea of being a dad so that I can walk into these situations, and instead of like being faced with that situation and then being like, how do I handle this? I already have done some of that research. I've already done some of that knowledge, but at least I have a tool in my belt that when I have a kid having a temper tantrum, I have a tool in my belt that I can try to utilize that tool. Whether it works or not, I don't know. But that's what we do in business. When we go to school, we learn how to do stuff, or we go to education pieces. But I didn't do that with children, and so that has been something that you face these super hard challenges, and as a business owner and as a dad, more importantly, is you get faced with those challenges, and you got to get past them. There's no quitting. Just like when you own your own business, you just can't quit on your business. More so when you have children, there's no quitting on your children. And so it's how do you continue to educate yourself, ask for help, and look at other people for help, and seek that education piece so that you can be a better dad to your kids. And that was a big learning experience. I kind of look back, and it's kind of like that same software experience that I had of, let's make this perfect software before we launch. Well, that wasn't the right path, but I didn't know that until I failed at it. And so I find the same thing with my kids is, just kind of going about, let's just have kids and we're just going to figure it out as we go along. I thought was what everybody did. I thought was a great idea. Now I'm coming to the realization it's like, okay, now, I'm learning. I'm finding new opportunities. I'm finding new ways to, how do you deal with this? How do we do these types of things? And it's not just up for me to learn. It's, there's people that have time tested, done this before, and have seen it work, that I can at least try it out. And so instead of trying to make up my own things on how do I deal with these things, I can use knowledge that's already out there to try to help me through that process, whether it works or not.
Like in business, we find mentors and people to help lead us. From a familial perspective, have you found like a series of mentors or somebody that you can rely on? Like, hey, I'm problem shooting this at home. Like, can you talk about the value of that community or village, or maybe it's just one person?
Yeah, so it's been a couple different things. I always look at, and it's a lot that comes from our church. Is it's looking at people that are older, and I recommend this in a marriage too. You see a couple that has had looks like from the outside a great marriage, or you see their kids, and they have great kids. Well, somewhere down deeper into those great kids was probably some type of parenting method, strategy, idea that led to that. And so I'd say the same thing with the marriage is, if you want to have a happy, successful marriage, talk to people that have happy and successful marriages, and they'll tell you that their marriage is not happy and successful, but they have gotten to the point where they are, and here's how they have fought those challenges that come in between, and it's not everything's perfect, and they can really kind of train you on what to do, because I think as a parent, as a husband, you're very vulnerable when you're in the worst point in time. If your marriage is at rock bottom, you're very vulnerable at that point. And it's how do you overcome those very vulnerable states that really comes to be, what type of dad are you going to be? What type of husband are you going to be? And so just talking to people that have gone through, you see success in having those conversations, as well as learning. So, I've used, just recently have been kind of learning about love and logic concept to raising kids and things like that. So taking advice from people who have been down those paths before, but then also looking I would say a little bit more scientific. I don't know if it's scientific as the actual method, but looking to something also that, hey, here's a method or here's a strategy that there are thousands of families that have utilized and have had really good success with, and kind of taking that experience as well, combined with personal one-on-one experience of people that you have relationships with.
Yeah. Well, so if you were going to write a job description for what your job is right now as a dad, it'll change in 5 years. But right now, what do you feel like your role is?
I think it's as a dad. You mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, at this stage of life, it's just be present and try to. My kids especially are at such a young age that there's a lot of they're building their roots, and that's a lot of what I'm going to be part of controlling. And so if we can build strong roots at a young age, the tree that can grow from that is really strong. Not to say that if someone is 15 and has no roots being built, that they can't become great people, great kids, whatever, and do great things in life. But the road to that greatness is going to be a lot easier if we build that foundation strong from the beginning. And so I think that is my role as a dad, is one, to start that foundation with a 2-year-old, a 1-year-old, a 3-year-old. What does that even look like? That's the part that I had to learn the hard way, or not the hard way, but I had to learn through experiences of saying, okay, here's what I thought it meant to be. How do I build a kid that respects people and a kid that is never naughty and does all these different things? Here's what I thought you did. And then all of a sudden, I did that, and guess what? We had a naughty kid. We had a kid that was, hard to deal with, and so you realize, like, okay, this thing's a lot harder than what you just think and what you envision it being. What is my goal now? I think a job role as a dad is, one, create that foundation, but just more importantly, be present with your kids at this age. Let them know that you're there for them, and so that's especially as entrepreneurs, that's a key thing that. People think I'll just build a foundation and that's it, but it's also just spending time with your kids that I think is so important, and maybe leads to that foundation piece too.
Yeah, I definitely, if I could go back to my kids are 8 and 9 now. And the hardest part of my relationship, hardest part of being a parent was the age that your kids are presently. I was very not focused on being present. I was focused on making as much money as I can. What could I possibly do for these kids? And I'd go back and do that all over again the way you're describing it. That's just making me feel like I could do that part over again.
Yeah.
Mike, I want to ask you some go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Please, I got rapid fire questions, but we'll get to it after you.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I always kind of joke of my friends that I have I have a group of friends. I have a college friends and then high school friends, and my high school friends had kids later in life, and my college friends all had them before I did, and so I always blame them and say, hey, you guys, you didn't warn me about this idea of having kids. You're just like, you guys should have kids, and you're gonna have some sleepless nights at the beginning, but this is a lot different than just some sleepless nights. Like, this is a completely life change. And I said, I think you guys need to do a little bit better of warning people. And they're like, well, Mike, I think if we warned everybody, there'd be a lot less kids in this world about how many kids. I'm like, yeah, you're right. You're probably right. So,
rapid fire questions for you, Mike. If we were going to build a super dad, what characteristics would you kind of lay as the foundation that just the perfect dad would need to have? Just 2 or 3.
Yeah, love, strict, and guidance. And so I'd say love is just you have to have a heart for your kids and let them be able to see that, but also you're not your kid's best friend, you're their dad, and so there's a good mix there between it. But that's what I think the strict thing is just letting your kids know, like, hey, I'm your dad, I'm not your best friend, even though they can be the same thing. Oftentimes they're different, and then guidance.
Okay, and tell me what you mean by guidance.
I think it's just being able to, one thing that I've kind of been doing with our oldest, who has, I'd say always is our struggle child, but he tests us really well. And so the guidance thing is just showing him how he can accomplish things on his own without doing it for them, but being there to lend his hand, so whether it's basic things like how do you put your clothes on, different things like that, is he'll try to put a shirt on and get frustrated and be like, "Dad, do this." I'm like, "No, I think you can do this, but it might be on backwards, inside out. I don't care as long as he's trying and so it's that guidance, not just being like, I'm just going to do this for you because it's frustrating. Now, as an entrepreneur, I feel like I'm always like, everything's got to be perfect. I want to help you. I just want to get it done. And so I've had to bite my tongue a lot in this learning process of saying, okay, the shirt's going on backwards, his hand is through the neck, like this is going to be a disaster, but I just got to let it be. I got to let him figure this out. And so it's that guidance thing, but not avoidance.
I had stumbled earlier because I couldn't recall the question I wanted to ask you, but it's come back to me. As somebody who's clearly a hard-charging entrepreneur and involved in lots of things, and then you had kids, and then you're trying to balance that presence with your kids and also babying the other businesses you're building. Do you have any practical tips or strategies for balancing and being more present at home and not being full-time thinking about work?
I wish I had the golden nugget to that, but I don't. But, I think that one thing as a business owner, I don't think you ever shut your mind off. You're constantly thinking, you're watching some TV show on Netflix and you're thinking about, okay, what's this next business idea I can get from this? Or how can I utilize this TV show? I was just watching the show Hit List on Netflix. And I'm like, oh, look at the sales strategy that these guys are utilizing. Like, how can I utilize some of that in my business? And, it's hard to ever turn things off. So I think that that's always going to happen, but it's how can you do better than you did yesterday, and every day waking up with that mindset of how can I do better than I did yesterday. One thing for me is just the constant access to the phone and constantly checking things. So for me, it's moving all of my apps, turning off all notifications, moving any apps with the indicator on it to the second page, so I have to physically go to the second page to see those different things. Just allows me to be present, because I was constantly, before kids, it's every time that phone makes a noise, vibrates, checking it. If it doesn't make a vibrate in 5 minutes, I'm looking and seeing, okay, is there a new email there? Is there something else I should be focusing my attention on? And I still struggle with that, but it's how do I get away from that more so that I'm just not focusing on that when I don't need to be. Now, kids are asleep and I'm hanging out. Is it okay to do some work here and there? That I'm fine with, but it's how do I move my attention away as much as possible, take the distractions away when it's time to be around my family.
Awesome, thank you. Is there a skill that you're particularly excited to teach your kids?
I think I always say my superpower is taking complex topics and making them easy to understand. And so I understand tax law and I make it easy to understand for other people to understand, or for other people, the non-tax person to understand. I think that's a powerful thing in life, whether you're a business owner or not a business owner, is being able to decipher things and help it make sense for other people in just everyday conversations. And so that would be a skill that I think, I look at it as our employees. It's a skill that I try to teach our employees. It's a skill I try to teach our family members, things like that. But that's something that I think will be super helpful for my kids.
Real, imagined, fictional. Is there a father figure on a TV show or somebody in your life that you always just thought was the coolest dad?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. The coolest dad. Yeah, honestly, nothing directly comes to mind. I mean, being a religious guy, I kind of look at a heavenly father and something like that, and so I think that's obviously something that would never be attainable by someone on earth here. But I think that has always been a motivation to me, is just how can I be closer to that.
If there was no time, space, reality, no limitations of money, and you could give a gift to every dad on the planet, what is a gift you would give to every father?
Patience. I kind of mentioned that was a shock to my system. I think it's just this idea of patience. We have control over so many things in our life, and when you have kids, that control is erased, whether it's an attitude of a kid or health-related things, and so you don't have control over those types of things. And patience is something that is a skill that I have honed specifically since having children.
How have you honed it? How have you cultivated it? How have you become a more patient person?
It's through different practices. So I've started to meditate not consistently, but I try to use meditation as just that way to ground myself. But it's also understanding that, you have to put yourself in the kid's position. And, I struggled with this as a business owner as well. Sometimes, employees weren't getting things done in time, or employees would run into an issue here, or a client wouldn't get work back to me, and I'd get frustrated in that and be like, I'm here, I want to help, I can do everything I can, but I'd get frustrated because things weren't being done outside of my control like I expected them to be. But then you still put yourself in that person's shoes and understand, they're a business owner going crazy, and now this request from them is just one of 1,000 requests. Okay, I get that. Or this employee that I expected to do a great thing on this job, I never told them how to do it. I never did training on them on how they could do it better. So that's kind of on me. I could have made that process a lot easier. They're trying to figure out how to do this when I could have trained them how to do it. And it's the same thing with a kid. The kids have different mindsets. They have different intentions. They know less about what the day-to-day, lifestyle of our family is. And so it's putting yourself in their situation that really, outside of mindfulness practice and things like that, but has really helped me understand and realize where they are. And also how fragile kids are is, you get in a situation where you're yelling at kids or constantly yelling, or you see families that yell at kids a lot, and you realize that's not helping anybody. You get frustrated as a parent. The child doesn't understand necessarily those situations, and it's a learning experience. You do things and find out that there's different routes that you can go down that you just never really maybe didn't put enough attention to or thought about.
All right. Mike, when in your life do you feel the most love?
When do I feel, that's a great question. I think it's spending downtime or quiet time as a family. So, everything is chaotic, and it feels like as young kids, old kids, wherever you are in your kid journey, there's always, everything's moving by you really quick, and you're constantly going here, going there, picking this up, putting this away. But the times where you can really spend time with your child, whether it's sitting down and watching TV together, whether it's reading a book, putting my kids to sleep, go to bed at night is some of the most enjoyable times, because you're just getting to spend time with just them alone, no distractions. The conversations that, frustrating or not, that I have with my 3-year-old putting him to bed are some of the funnest conversations I ever have. And so you kind of really feel that playfulness and that mind and the way that the amount that your kids love you that you don't necessarily see when you have a kid that's throwing something he's not supposed to or doing something that you told him not to. You don't know that that's there, but it comes out in those types of moments.
Before I ask you the last question, would you please share all your contact information, how to find you, where people can get your book, listen to your podcast, find you on social media, whatever?
Yeah, so our podcast is Small Business Tax Savings Podcast. You can find it on any podcasting platform. And really the best place to find kind of everything that we have going on is just to go to taxsavingspodcast.com. And you'll have links to our podcast there, our software Tax Elm. We have a YouTube channel, taxsavingstv.com. So yeah, lots of ways, but taxsavingspodcast.com, best place to reach us.
Awesome. And finally, in the event this recording lasts for many generations of Jesowsheks, your great, and so on grandchildren get to listen to it, what's a message you would share with them that you would love to impart to every generation?
Yeah, I think it's just this idea of, love others, be kind to others, and, most importantly, approach every relationship as how can I help you? And how can I help you, which will in turn make you a better person in that process as well.
That's awesome. Thank you, Mike, for being here.
Yeah, Tyler, thanks for having me. It's been fun.